So we just wrapped up the collecting game for the two players going against one another. Now we could extend this particular type of game, but I thought maybe we can show how we can use one bigger game and have the players do two different things. This first one, they're competing against one another, and let's make an actual layout where they're working together. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to my layouts here, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to add a new layout. And when I add a new layout, I do want to include the event sheet because this is independent and separate from the collecting game. And I'm going to call this Working Together game. This Working Together game, I want it to have the same size as the collecting game. So if you forgot what that value is, if you go over to the collecting game, it's 1920 by 1080, so I'm going to copy that. And then on the Working Together, I'm going to include that as well. And I'm going to go ahead and change the background color on this one. So I'll go more of a green color this time. And I may change that as we decide on what blocks to use. Now this event sheet that we created, event sheet 1, it has a generic meaning. We have no meaning behind this. So you want to name these things accordingly. So right click, rename. This is the Working Together events. And then on this one, we can include this player events that makes player 1 work. So I'm going to right click, include, and I want to include the player events on there. I'm going to save my work. Back to our game. This is where you're going to go ahead and put in your second tile map. So I'm going to insert a new tile map. I'll call this Working I'm going to go back. And this time, I used the base pack originally. I'm going to go in and I'm going to use the ice expansion this time. And I'm going to go to tiles. And if I go all the way to the bottom, nope, I don't see the tile map there. It's going to be right here. So inside the folder, it has it as an independent here sheet. That's what I want there. These tiles, again, are 70 by 70, but this time there is no spacing in this. So this is different than the base pack. There's no spacing. But I do need to make sure that my tile width and height are 70 by 70, but do not include the tile spacing. I'm also going to make sure that I'm showing the grid. I'm also going to snap to grid. This will be 70 by 70. And let's take a look at what does this ice tile look like on that green background. That might be okay. If I was to save, look at it in preview, that looks like okay. The green will work with that. And then go and continue. I'm going to go ahead and pause for a minute, let you work on your design level, and I'll see you back shortly. So now you have your layout started. In this particular one here, I just put a lot of open areas because I'm going to include the moving platforms on this level. So I'm going to grab a couple of these. I'm going to place them out here in different areas that are going to be moving up and down based on their magnitude. So I'll make sure that each of them run independently of one another. This one here will go up and down. This one here is going to go up just a short amount. So this is going to go up 140. This one, I'll go to 10. This one here. And then if you want to, if you put a negative number, they'll run backwards. So if I want them to run in a different direction, if I include a negative value, they'll move in the opposite direction of one another. So let's take a look at that. So that these can move up and down in different directions. The only things that we're going to include on this level are both player 1 and 2. So I'm going to go ahead and grab player 1. And I'm going to grab player 2. put them in a couple of different starting positions there. But on this one, they're going to need to work together to collect a key to open a door. So I'm going to go ahead and insert some new objects here. So we'll call this player 1 key. The keys can be found back on the base pack in the items folder. Is that you'll have keys. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do one color for one and one color for the other one. Because I'm using the robot, I'm going to use the blue key for the robot. So blue key for the robot. The blue key is going to be up at the very top here. And then the zombie, I'm going to use the green key. Now with the fact that I got a green background, I'm going to change that now that I've got a green color key on here. This is not going to work. Not with the blue either. There you go, purple will work. Is that we want to have specific areas blocked off where the key is going to be at, and a trigger that each player needs to stomp on in order to get the other one set up. Now, because the green here is, I'm going to use a green trigger on this side, and because it's on the player 1 side, I'm still going to call it player 2 trigger. And I'm going to use these buttons here. So if I select 2 of them, one in the up position, one in the down position, and I want to rotate these because the speed, so each animation has a speed and it will run through one time. So on the start of the game, it'll run into the open position. When the player bumps into it, it'll go down and then go back up. So let's take a look and see what this... And it's also not being placed on the tile ground correctly because its origin's at center. So let's fix that for the origin. And I'm going to go ahead and do bottom left. And I want to make sure I do it for both animation frames, bottom left. Now I can place that item or that object on the ground, and if I take a look at this, that object is in the up position, and it looks like my players left the scene there because I did not include the solid behavior on my tile map. So let's go ahead and do that. And so this is in the down position graphically. In preview mode, it's going to pop up. Now, the same thing for the other player. Player 1 trigger. I'm going to use the blue. I'm going to flip-flop these two. I want to change the origin to that bottom left. And then I can put this over here as well. And then once each player runs into the specific object, I need to remove some blocks. Sort of a hidden area to let the players in. So this will be sprite. So player 1 block. I'm gonna go now. I could go back to the ice expansion, but I'm gonna go back to the base pack because there's more tiles to work with. And I'm going to use this box here with the X. I'm also going to change his origin to bottom left. And then I'm going to put a couple here. Now, what I could have done is make this a tile background as well, rather than an individual sprite. That could save me a few objects, because right now I have to actually make 3 of these instead of 1. So if I was to redo that, so instead of making this a sprite, I'm going to delete that. And let's add in a tiled background, because the object is repeating itself. I can use that same graphic over and over again. And there you have it, one object in one area. Now, I want to use this for both areas. So one, we'll have player 1 will get the X's over here to block off the key. Player number 2, I'm just going to do a tiled background. And then I'm going to use the one that's got a hollow base on it. So what we could do is move the key in, and I can put that block like so. Now these objects, make sure they have a solid behavior. Otherwise the players are just going to walk through them and grab the key, and we don't want that. So those areas are all blocked off. Now we have to have player 2 will touch player 1's trigger, which is going to unlock the blocks on this side. Player 1 touches player 2's trigger, unlocks these blocks. So back on the working together events, that when player 1 is on collision with the player 2 trigger, I want to start the animation so it goes in that up and down position. So I'm going to go to start. I want to start from the beginning. That's going to make the animation happen. When I do that, I want to take the blocks that are on, take player 2's blocks, and I want to set them invisible. And I also want to remove the collider on them, because even though they're invisible, the collider is still active. So we need to go down to miscellaneous. Where's the collider on this one here? Let's double check that block, in fact, it has a solid. So then player 2 under solid, where it says set enabled, I want to disable. Then I'm gonna wait a random amount of time and then have the blocks turn back on. So instead of a solid number here, or what they call a fixed number, I'm going to randomize the numbers from 1 second to 3 seconds. Give the player some random amount of time, and then I want to take these same 2 objects but do the opposite. So I'm going to select them both, but instead of invisible, it'll go back to visible. And instead of disabled, we're going to go to enabled. And then I'm going to do the same thing for player 2. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to replace the object. So player 1 with player 2, and then player 2's trigger with player 1's trigger. And then I'm going to do the opposite here, player 1's trigger. select all 4 of those, right click, replace object with player 1 block. And we're going to go ahead and test this out. So player 1, if I hit the trigger, it's going to have those blocks turn on and off over here. And then if player 2 hits the trigger, it's also going to remove those blocks over there. Which means that one player needs to be ready, so when player 1 happens, I can get the key and get out of there before the blocks turn back on. Now each of the players has to keep track if they have the key. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set up so each player, we're going to add a second variable here, and we'll call this has key. It'll be a string. Its initial value is no. Same thing with player 1. Has key. It's a string value where we're going to use a word now, yes or no. And so player 1 is on collision with its key. So player 1 gets the blue key. Then I'm going to say player 1, I'm going to set the instant variable. I'm going to set the value of has key to yes. And then I want to destroy that key. And then for player 2, set the value to yes, and then destroy that key. All right. So double check that this is working for you. So that if player 2, which the jumping ability is off, but we can at least get them ready to go. And player 1 will get the trigger. Player 1, oh, it gets stuck, so player 1 has to let the player 2 out. All right. Verify that that's working, and we'll see you on the next video.